Well, hello, all my amazing friends. My name is SherriAnneDuffy-King, and I'm the writer of the Title of a Crucified Innocence series, alright? And we're going to be discussing Book 2, The Prince in the Mirror, right? And we're on Chapter 39, Secrets of Corner's Peak, alright? Let's get going on it, shall we? Now Evie jumped up, holding back salty hot tears, crossing to Nemesis' skull. How had she not thought of this before? She was the only one left alive to remember what she had done. Evie collapsed onto the side of his right cheekbone and started using her fingers to pull dirt away from her intended treasure vault. Hot tears and sobs were what escaped her. She couldn't help it. The last time she was here, she was also crying and never faded that she was accepting the same devastating emotions before. Iolaus dived for her, holding her hands, inspecting the blood and dirt edged across her bleeding hands. He put both of her hands onto his one hand and held her with the other, accepting unnatural sobs, all while wondering what was going on. Evie pushed her hands out of his and continued to dig. Iolaus lost his balance and lifted his free hand to grab for the wall of the skull. His hand seared into the emotions that he was witnessed Evie experiencing. But instead of crying, he opened his senses wider and watched images of the past flit before his eyes like moving pictures of magic. He watched everything, his stomach lurching. A girl who was the size of a giant snuck secretly to Nemesis. His flesh was seething off of his bones, the eyes, nose, and mouth still producing crystal blue water. Dark black hair swished around a translucent woman. She glanced back and forth. Iolaus could clearly see Eldor and the sky through her head and silhouette. Her tears were overbearing. She was bearing a very large chest, with a book of some sort stuffed deep inside, holding something sinister. Then Iolaus reverberated back to reality. Evie was pulling up the chest, brushing the dirt off of it. She creaked it open and stared in anticipated awe. Tears still flowing, Iolaus could only guess sarcastically at what those images were, somewhat significant to the past, and the story retold to him through his tormented childhood. Evie held the book and slowly shifted it so that she could clear her eyes of tears and crack it open. On the first page read, "The book of prophecies is a lie. I changed it so I could save her. Oh, almighty Aneo, please forgive me for my treachery. Please understand I did what I did to save her soul and all of ours. Neither will win if she understands her purpose. The ploy will only work for so long until I can figure out how to divert time and mislead fate. But my efforts seem pointless. Oh, Aneo, never let her find out." Evie was confused for a second, then closed the book, along with the memories that came with it. Iolaus reached for the book and flipped it open to Eldwinian, reading it pensively. Then, when no one was looking, he tore out the page and placed the paper in his pocket and hid the book in his knapsack. He would take the book home and try to figure out what was going on. Chapter 40. Chapter 40. Okay, chapter 40. I lost my page, sorry. Just gonna have to be so patient with me. He keeps talking about editing it. I don't want to edit it off of Wattpad. Chapter 40, Submissive Pledges. A fog withered silently through Corner's Peak. At the base of Nemesis' skull waterfall, below sat a tame flame barely holding on to life from the chill night air, many tents circling it like the Milky Way. Evie sat next to the pit, watching it slowly begin to slumber, and with it, the heat dissipated. Evie combed her long auburn hair out of her eyes with her fingers, then brushed her arms with her palms. With the chill came a nipping of frost in the air. She would never truly guess why the weather was so fickle here, but enjoyed the changes as much as an intriguing conversation. Evie stood, brushed off her bottoms, and decided to scavenge for wood in the death forest. It was the best this way because a nice evening walk would help clear her thoughts and strengthen her silence towards some intense realizations. And at this moment, confiding in someone would end all her hopes for a brighter future. She tried to hide what the memories and the book had brought back into her life. Had she really hoped at one point that remembering everything was better than leaving important details forgotten and lost to time itself? How naive had she been? But now that she chose her oath towards recollection, she'd have to lie in the bed she had made. The original handwritten script had been stolen by her in another time. How could she not think that the past and her digression wouldn't come back and nip her in the butt for falsifying a text now revered and worshipped by all of Imbala and Eldor? Evie slapped her palms onto her eyes and fell to her knees, trying to hold back sneaky tears, but even that was hard to prevent. They slid down her face, falling into a thickening fog. Oh, how Evie wanted to raise her hands into the air and pray that the almighty Aneo would forgive her. But she didn't want everything to crumble. Oh no, Evie wanted to save as many people as she could and hoped to Aneo that he would also answer her prayers. But only silence echoed back from the heavens. Evie stood and brushed off her pants again. Then she started searching for wood. She had a bunch of twigs and a few skinny logs in her arms before she saw a shiny piece of oak. She reached down, dropping a few of her twigs in her arms. She stopped, reaching down, to rearrange them in her arms, then noticed a thick fog circling her, and above the fog, mist reigned, and just barely above the snowflakes slunk down from the clear sky. Evie was dumbstruck and even colder by the second. She looked back toward camp and could no longer see the glowing trees and brush. Everything was dark and eerie. Evie continued to grasp onto the lost twigs as a growling sound furrowed from the depths of the death forest and fog. Evie stopped again and turned her head toward the noise. A frightening chill ran across her skin as she watched intently as darkness and white fog. Evie scanned her surroundings again, trying to adjust her eyes in case she needed to make a quick run for it. Everything was still translucent and eerie. Elder was hidden in an eclipse of Imbala. Maybe her ears were playing tricks on her. Evie continued to pick up the twigs that had fallen, still feeling cautious in case it wasn't an illusion. After reestablishing them in her arms, comfortably beneath the wood, she saw the same shiny oak glinting a few steps away from her. Evie cautiously stumbled over to it, bent low, and reached her fingers over it. As her fingers met the eminent material, something leapt onto her, knocking the twigs and slender logs away from her arms. Evie rolled, then stopped, pinching her eyelids together in fear. Somehow this was all like deja vu. No longer could she stand, not knowing what had knocked on. Evie opened her eyes and watched two deep mahogany glowing eyes slicing through the fog. Then a snout appeared. Evie just laid in amazement, watching the deep red fur of the lichen coming into view, taking each step as if it were prowling for dinner. Evie had seen those eyes before, but couldn't place them in her life if her life depended on it. The great beast stalked toward her. Evie decided to make a run for it. She jumped up and started running blindly through thick trees and brush that seemed to snap back and smack her. Avoiding the stinging pain, she ran, tears of fear escaping her eyes, making everything blurrier than before. Evie could hear the thick thunder colliding with the gravel and branches beneath or behind her. She could feel the heat of the beast's mouth on her back and her heart colliding fast as she threw herself faster than before, running through unmarked paths. A hand grasped onto her shoulder, knocking her down onto the ground hard. As Evie spun, she prodded for her sword and tried to pull it out for safety. The beast pressed his body into the blade, not wincing. With half an inch between their faces, it sniffed her, then pulled back, shedding fur and snout. Now all that lay on top of Evie was a man, with deep auburn hair, long and flowing over his shoulders and back. He continued to sniff her. Evie was stunned, watching and waiting for this man to do something. She could not even ponder the webbed ideas that sprouted from her mind. She opened her mouth to scream, but his hand cupped her lips. "Shh, I'm sorry I frightened you, miss." Evie's eyes widened. "If I let go of your mouth, promise not to offend my ears and pride with your wails of hysterics?" Evie nodded, still suspicious. He unclasped his hand. "Hey, I know you, don't I? I've seen you someplace before, but your eyes and complexion have changed." Evie kept quiet. This man could easily be one of Akamutra's men, and that wouldn't be wise to announce who she was. The stunning man pulled off of her and stood, mist-circling him as if he were a god. Evie glanced down at his bottoms. He was wearing black balloon-shaped bottoms. Black signified Black Castle, Iolus's fortress of solitude and evil destitute. He must be one of Iolus's men. Evie just sat listening, because any bloke could find a pair of those and imitate a soldier from an opposing fortress estate. Evie knew that Aiden played a triple spy, castle against castle, and both never knew what hit them till they found out Aiden was working for the people and creatures from around Ambala and Eldor. But instead of talking, she did the listening. "I'm sorry, miss, what's your name?" Evie was about to answer as the stunned man knelt toward her and helped her off of the ground. His hand was extended as she reached up to grasp onto him. The bushes started to rustle as Aiden and Iolus jumped from them. Evie gawked. Wow, now they show up. Alright? The man dropped his extended hand and looked back to where the noise was coming from, and then dropped to his knees in disbelief. "Evie, thank a nail that you're alright." Evie smiled then. "Iolus, Aiden." Evie was so pleased that they had shown up. "It never fails that you will always attract danger. Are you alright?" Evie nodded, not being able to suppress a smile as bright as Eldor if it was visible. Then she glanced toward the man who had ranted on earlier. "Sire Iolus, General Aiden McTavish." Before Evie knew it, Iolus and Aiden were standing right in front of the man. Iolus smiled, but Aiden was the first to answer. "Ah, Raylos, it's been a long time. How have you been, my old friend?" Iolus walked over to Evie and helped her up. He brushed her hair out of her face, checking for any bruises, then hugged her. "Evie, tell me, what were you doing